Suffering is one of the most challenging questions we grapple with, especially when we believe in a loving and all-powerful God. The Bible doesn't shy away from this topic and provides some key insights that help us understand why suffering exists. First, it's important to recognize that suffering entered the world as a result of sin. In Genesis, God created a perfect world, free from pain and death. But when Adam and Eve disobeyed God, sin entered creation, and with it came suffering, disease, and death. Romans chapter 5 verse 12 explains, "Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all people, because all sinned." So, suffering is a consequence of living in a fallen world. It's not something that God created or desired, but rather the result of human free will and sin. However, the Bible also shows that God is not distant or indifferent to our pain. In fact, He is intimately involved in our suffering, and He can use it for His purposes. Romans chapter 8 verse 28 assures us that God works all things together for good to those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. This doesn't mean that every instance of suffering is good in itself, but that God can bring good out of even the worst situations. We see this in the life of Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his brothers, unjustly imprisoned, and separated from his family for years. Yet, in the end, Joseph could say, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good," which we can find in Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. His suffering led to the salvation of many lives during a famine. But suffering often serves a refining purpose in our lives. In James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4, we're encouraged to consider it pure joy when we face trials, because the testing of our faith produces perseverance. Suffering can shape our character, deepen our faith, and draw us closer to God. The Apostle Paul understood this well, having endured tremendous suffering, and yet he wrote in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul recognized that in his weakest moments, God's strength was most evident. Lastly, we must remember that God's ultimate plan is to redeem and restore all things. While we may not fully understand the purpose behind every instance of suffering in this life, the Bible gives us hope for the future. Revelation chapter 21, verse 4, promises that in the new heaven and new earth, He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. This means that suffering is temporary. God's final plan is one of complete restoration, where pain and sorrow will be no more. In the meantime, we are invited to trust in God's goodness, even when we don't understand. Jesus Himself suffered immensely on the cross to bring about the ultimate good, our salvation. His suffering assures us that God is not distant from our pain. Instead, He has walked through it, and He offers comfort, hope, and the promise of eternal life to those who trust in Him. Thank you for watching. If this video helped you better understand why God allows suffering, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel for more Bible-based content. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss future videos. God bless, and see you next time.